Coming up, 2 Grand Forks County deputies are on administrative leave following an officer-involved shooting. And a 20-year-old woman has died after a home explosion in southern Minnesota. Plus, the Alara Center in Grand Forks shows support for Ukraine. Valley News Live at 10 starts now.
This is Valley News Live at 10.
New tonight at 10. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nishay Taylor. The Grand Forks County Sheriff's Office says a man was injured during an officer-involved shooting this morning. Deputies were called just before 11:30 a.m. after a car that was driving erratically had crashed into a ditch near the 800 block of County Highway 81. While deputies were on their way to the scene, a nearby homeowner called to report a man trying to break into their house. When they arrived at the home, a woman told them a man with a gun was near her vehicle. A 37-year-old man from Grand Forks was found by authorities holding a gun. Deputies ordered him to drop the weapon, but he refused after several commands. That's when they say the man began approaching them, at which point the deputies fired their weapons and striking the suspect. The man was taken to a local hospital to be treated for non-life-threatening injuries. 2 deputies have been placed on administrative leave. Meanwhile, 1 person has died in a crash between a car and a truck that involved a total of 10 people shortly after 12:30 this morning. The crash happened on Highway 210 in Otter Tail County, about 20 miles east of Fergus Falls. NPS says a 19-year-old Barnesville woman was driving her car west on the highway, while a 43-year-old Henning man was driving east in a truck similar to a moving truck when they both collided. Authorities say road conditions were impacted by snow and ice. According to the news release, the truck was carrying 8 other passengers. It's unclear if those passengers were all in the cab of the truck at the time of the crash. It's unclear who out of the 10 was killed. The conditions of the others is also not known. The incident remains under investigation. A 20-year-old woman was killed in a house explosion in southern Minnesota last night. According to the LaSource County Sheriff's Office, it happened in Lexington Township just before 11:30 p.m. When authorities arrived, the home was burning and had collapsed. The young woman had been house sitting while the homeowners were out of the area. After putting out the fire, authorities found her dead in the basement. She has not been officially identified by law enforcement, but friends identify her as Kaylee Mock, a student of Augsburg University. Ukraine's Interior Ministry says 352 Ukrainian civilians have been killed during Russia's invasion, including 14 children. The ministry also says nearly 1,700 additional people, including 116 children, have been wounded. It's also unclear how many Ukrainian armed forces casualties there have been. Russian President Vladimir Putin has put his country's nuclear forces on high alert, pointing to what he calls aggressive statements by top NATO powers and financial sanctions. Now Putin's order raises new fears about how the crisis in Ukraine could unfold as the United Nations agreed to hold an emergency session on the invasion tomorrow. Here's more.
This video from a suburb of Kyiv appears to show a line of Russian tanks and armored trucks bombed out and still smoking, an attempt by Ukrainians to slow Russian troops. Kyiv's mayor says his city of almost 3 million is completely surrounded, and new satellite imagery shows hundreds of Russian military vehicles only about 40 miles away. Sunday, street fighting broke out in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, forcing a children's hospital to relocate to an underground bomb shelter. Overnight, Russian forces blew up Ukrainian airfields and fuel facilities. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his nuclear forces to prepare for action. Simultaneously, Russia said it was ready to enter peace talks with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky agreed, but vowed not to give up an inch of Ukraine's territory. The European Union has offered to send help.
The European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack.
Tens of thousands of Ukrainians are trying to escape, crowding onto trains, driving towards safe borders only to wait in long lines, or walking miles through the night.
героям.
This Ukrainian boy teared up, explaining he and his mother left his father behind to fight. Some Ukrainian men living outside their home country are returning.
I just can't sleep calmly. I woke up and I cried.
Tensions are also high in Russia. In protests around the country, Russians chanted no to war, and police in riot gear made arrests. In St. Petersburg and Moscow, there are long lines at ATMs following word that some Russian banks have been expelled from SWIFT, a high-security network that connects banks around the world.
Analysts say due to the panic, Russia may have to temporarily close bank branches or declare a national bank holiday to protect its financial systems. The U.S. Department of State announced today that it would provide additional humanitarian assistance for the people of Ukraine. The press release issued by Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated that the U.S. will be providing nearly $54 million in humanitarian assistance to those affected by Russia's invasion. The additional assistance will enable international humanitarian organizations to further support the people of Ukraine by providing provisions such as food, safe drinking water, shelter, emergency health care, and protection. Tonight, the Alaris Center in Grand Forks is lit up blue and yellow to show support for Ukraine. Alaris officials also say they are removing all Russian vodka from their bars and catering menus for the foreseeable future. Others in North Dakota are also standing in solidarity with Ukrainians during the ongoing Russian invasion. The Blarney Stone in Bismarck is joining thousands of other bar owners around the country, pausing the sale of Russian alcohol.
People have been talking about it, and we just thought that we would jump on board the bandwagon and do the same thing too. I mean, it just seems like a good way to kind of support Ukraine and to send a message that we don't agree with how the whole situation is being handled by the Russians.
Now, Blarney Stone locations in Fargo and Sioux Falls will also pause the sales on Russian alcohol starting tomorrow. North Korea has fired a suspected ballistic missile into the sea this morning. Japan's defense ministry says North Korea launched a possible missile. Some experts say North Korea is pushing the United States government to lift sanctions as disarmament talks have stalled. Rolled fencing was installed today ahead of President Biden's State of the Union address on Tuesday. Officials say this is a move due to expected protests in Washington, D.C. The fencing will cover the inner perimeter around the Capitol, and at least 700 National Guardsmen have also been deployed in an unarmed capacity through March 7th. Their primary goal will be crowd and traffic control. Masks are now optional for Tuesday's State of the Union. They were mandatory last April when President Joe Biden addressed a joint session of Congress held just 100 days into his presidency, when attendance was limited to about 200 people. Right now, there's no word on whether President Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris will wear masks. Meanwhile, 2 new studies claim to provide definitive evidence that COVID-19 started in a wet market in Wuhan, China. The research indicates coronavirus had its origin in a live animal at the market in late 2019. But instead of a bat, as previously thought, the animal vector was more likely a Chinese raccoon dog or similar-sized mammal. One of the authors from the University of Arizona says the data rules out the theory that the virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan. Pandemic prices have affected everything from groceries to cars and now childcare. A recent study from Lending Tree found that the average cost per child for center-based childcare has risen 41%. Minnesota is already one of the most expensive states for childcare. The study found the average annual cost of a child care center pre-pandemic for one child was around $11,000 in Minnesota. During COVID-19, that number is around $18,000, a 60% increase. The study found Minnesota families pay around 18% of their income towards childcare, which is the 6th most expensive in the country. Later on Valley News Live at 10, BP abandons a Russian oil deal. And temperatures are expected to stay above 0 this week, but there could be a chance for snow.